The research ship Meridian was flying through space when everything went wrong. Jake Martinez was fixing a broken pipe in the engine room when the lights started flashing red. The ship shook hard, and he fell against the wall. All crew to escape. Pods now, came the voice over the speakers. It was Captain Brooks, and he sounded scared. Jake had never heard the captain sound scared before. Jake ran down the hallway. Other crew members were running too. He saw Commander Vexhall, a tall alien with gray fur and sharp teeth. The Valkyrian warrior was helping his people get to the pods. Dr. Neareth, the blue-skinned Aquarian, was carrying medical supplies. Chief, Engineer Quill, a Xanthari with 4 arms, was trying to save some of their equipment. The ship shook again, harder this time. Sparks flew from the walls. The lights went out for a moment and came back on dimmer than before. The engines are dead, someone shouted. We have maybe 10 minutes before the reactor explodes. Jake reached the pod bay. Most of the pods were already gone. He could see them through the window, small white dots flying toward the planet below. Only 3 pods were left. Jake, get in pod 7. Lieutenant Amy Foster called out. She was the only other human on the ship besides Jake and the captain. Hurry up. Jake climbed into pod 7 and pressed the launch button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. The launch system is broken, he said. I can't get out. Amy ran over to help him. She hit the manual release with her fist. The pod door closed, but the launch system still would not work. I'll fix it from outside, she said. Just hold on. But there was no time. The ship shook so hard that Jake's teeth rattled. Through the pod window, he could see Amy being thrown across the room. She hit her head on a wall and did not get up. The ship's emergency system kicked in. Jake's pod shot out into space without warning. He was pressed back into his seat as the pod flew away from the dying ship. Jake looked back and saw the Meridian explode. It was a bright flash that hurt his eyes. Pieces of metal flew in all directions. He hoped Amy had made it to another pod, but he could not see her anywhere. The planet below was green and blue, with white clouds swirling around it. It looked peaceful from space, but Jake knew looks could be fooling. The pod's computer was trying to find a safe place to land, but it kept making beeping sounds that meant something was wrong. Warning, the computer said. Navigation system damaged. Landing will not be controlled. Jake held on tight as the pod entered the planet's air. It got hot inside, and he could smell something burning. The pod spun around and around. Jake felt sick, but he tried not to throw up. Through the spinning, he could see trees below. Lots and lots of trees. The pod was falling fast toward a thick forest. This was going to hurt. The pod hit the trees hard. Branches broke against the windows. Jake heard metal scraping and tearing. The pod bounced off one tree, then another, then crashed into the ground with a loud bang. Everything went quiet. Jake's head hurt, and his left arm felt wrong. He looked down and saw blood on his shirt. The pod was tilted to one side, and one of the windows was cracked. Water was already starting to drip inside. Water. It was raining. Jake tried to open the pod door, but it was stuck. He pushed harder, using his good arm. The door opened with a loud creak. Rain immediately soaked his face and clothes. He climbed out of the pod and looked around. Trees were everywhere, tall and thick. The ground was soft and muddy. Rain fell steadily from dark gray clouds above. Everything smelled green and wet. Jake went back into the pod to get his survival kit, but it was not there. The crash had thrown everything around. He found some pieces scattered in the mud outside, but most of it was gone or broken. His emergency beacon was cracked in half. His communication device was in pieces. "Hello," he called out. Can anyone hear me?" His voice disappeared into the forest. No one answered. Jake was alone. He looked at the broken pod. It would not keep the rain out for long. The cracked window was getting bigger, and water was pooling on the floor. He needed to find shelter soon, or he would be in trouble. But first, he needed to stop the bleeding on his arm. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and tied it around the cut. It was not much, but it would have to do. The other crew members were probably somewhere on this planet too. They might be looking for him, but Jake could not wait for them to find him. He had to take care of himself. He picked up a piece of metal from the pod that might be useful and started walking into the forest. The rain soaked through his clothes in minutes. His boots sank into the mud with each step. Jake Martinez was a long way from home, with no tools, no shelter, and no help coming. But he was alive, and that was something. He would figure out the rest as he went. The forest was dark and full of strange sounds, but Jake was not afraid. He was a human, and humans were good at staying alive. He would prove it. Jake woke up cold and wet. His whole body hurt, and the cut on his arm was still bleeding a little. He had spent the night under a big tree, but it had not kept the rain away. His clothes were soaked through. He sat up and looked around. The forest looked different in the daylight. The trees were huge, much bigger than any trees on Earth. Some had leaves as big as dinner plates. Strange birds made sounds he had never heard before. Jake's stomach growled. He had not eaten since before the crash, and that was almost a whole day ago. He needed food, but first he needed to get dry. Being wet all the time would make him sick. He walked back to his crashed pod. It was half full of water now, but he could still use some of the metal pieces. Jake pulled out the biggest flat piece he could carry. It was heavy, but it would work. Jake found two trees growing close together. He leaned the metal piece between them to make a simple roof. Rain hit the metal and ran off to the sides instead of falling on him. It was not much, but it was better than nothing. But the ground was still wet and muddy. Jake needed something to keep him off the ground. He broke branches from nearby trees and laid them under his metal roof. It was not comfortable, but it was drier than the mud. Jake stepped back and looked at his work. It was not pretty, but it would keep most of the rain off him. His grandfather would have been proud. The old man had taught Jake how to camp when he was a boy. Jake had thought those lessons were just for fun, but now they might save his life. Meanwhile, the other survivors were having their own problems. Commander Vexall and his team had landed about 10 miles away. They had set up their military shelter near their landing site, but it was not working well. "This rain is too much," growled Vexall. He was a proud warrior, but the constant water made his fur stick to his skin. It felt horrible. On my homeworld, we have dry heat. This wetness is like torture. Chief Engineer Quill was trying to fix their equipment, but water kept getting into the machines. "The humidity is too high," he said, using all 4 of his arms to work on a broken computer. "Our technology was not made for this environment." Dr. Neerad H. was checking on the crew members who were getting sick. "The water here has bacteria our bodies cannot fight," she said. "We need to purify everything we drink, but our purification system is failing." Lieutenant Amy Foster had made it to a pod just in time. She had a bad bump on her head, but she was alive. "We need to look for Jake," she said. "He might still be out there." "The human is dead," said Vexall. His beacon went silent. No one could survive out there with no equipment. Amy wanted to argue, but she felt too sick. The alien food made her stomach hurt, and the constant rain was making everyone miserable. Back in the forest, Jake was learning to survive. He found a stream with clear water and used his torn shirt to filter out the dirt. He boiled the water. in a metal cup he had made from pod pieces. It tasted funny, but it was clean. Food was harder. Jake tried eating some berries, but they made his mouth burn. He spit them out quickly. He would have to be more careful. The wrong food could kill him. Jake remembered his grandfather's words. When you don't know what's safe to eat, watch the animals. He sat quietly and watched the forest creatures. He saw small furry animals eating certain fruits. He saw birds picking at particular seeds. Jake tried the same fruits the animals ate. They were sour, but did not hurt his mouth. He ate them slowly, just a few at first. His stomach felt better after eating something hot at night. Jake made a fire. It took him a long time because everything was wet, but he finally got some dry wood from inside a dead tree. The fire made him feel better. It gave him light and warmth, and it helped keep away the strange sounds from the dark forest. While Jake was getting better at surviving, the alien crew was getting worse. Their shelter was leaking more each day. The Velcarians were developing skin problems from the constant moisture. The Zenfari equipment kept breaking down. Even the Aquarians, who liked water, were having trouble with the strange chemicals in the planet's rain. "We are running out of food," reported Quill. "The food makers are not working right. Everything tastes wrong. And our medicines are almost gone," added Dr. Nirad H. "3 more crew members are sick today." Commander Vexol looked at his miserable crew. They were supposed to be the best soldiers and scientists in the galaxy, but they were being beaten by some rain and mud. It was embarrassing. "How long until the rescue ship arrives?" he asked. "At least 3 more weeks," said Amy. "Maybe longer if they have trouble finding us." 3 weeks seemed like forever. Vexol was not sure they would all make it that long. Jake was having the opposite problem. Each day he was getting better at living in the forest. He had improved his shelter, adding walls made from woven branches. He had found better food sources. He was learning which plants were useful and which ones to avoid. Jake even started to enjoy some parts of his new life. The forest was beautiful when it was not raining. The strange animals were interesting to watch. He felt proud of what he had built with his own hands, but Jake missed other people. He talked to himself sometimes, just to hear a human voice. He wondered if the other crew members were still alive. He hoped Amy was okay. Jake did not know that Amy and the others were less than a day's walk away, struggling to survive in their failing high-tech shelter, while he was learning to thrive in the wilderness with nothing but his hands and his brain. 2 weeks had passed since the crash. Jake looked at what he had built and smiled. His first shelter was gone, replaced by something much better. He had learned to cut down trees using a sharp piece of metal from his pod. It was hard work, but Jake was getting stronger every day. His new house had 4 walls and a proper roof. He had dug a foundation and filled it with stones to keep the water out. The walls were made from logs he had cut and fitted together. Between the logs, he had stuffed mud and grass to keep the wind and rain from getting inside. The roof was the part Jake was most proud of. He had used flat stones to make tiles that let the rain run off into gutters he had carved from wood. The gutters carried the water away from his house and into a ditch that led to the stream. Inside his house, Jake had built a fireplace. It had taken him 3 tries to get it right, but now the smoke went up through a chimney instead of filling the room. The fire kept him warm and dry, and he could cook food over it. Jake had also learned to make better tools. He had a sharp knife made from metal and a handle made from wood. He had a hammer made from a heavy stone tied to a stick. He had spears for hunting and fishing nets made from twisted plant fibers. Food was no longer a problem. Jake had found fish in the stream and learned to catch them with his nets. He had built traps that caught small animals while he slept. He had even found some plants that grew well when he planted them near his house. Jake's clothes were different now, too. His old uniform had fallen apart, but he had made new clothes from animal skins. They were not pretty, but they kept him warm and dry. He had learned to treat the skins with tree bark to make them soft and waterproof at night. Jake would sit by his fire and think about the other survivors. He hoped they were safe, but he was not sure they were even alive. He had tried to find them, but the forest was huge, and he did not want to get lost. The alien crew was not doing well. Commander Vexal stood in their shelter and watched water drip through the ceiling. The military shelter that was supposed to be the best in the galaxy was falling apart. "The wall is collapsing on the east side," reported Quill. 2 of his arms were bandaged because he had been hurt trying to fix their equipment. "The support beams are rotting from the inside." "How can that be?" asked Vexal. "These shelters are made from the strongest materials in the galaxy. The materials are strong against heat and cold and radiation," said Quill. "But they were not designed for constant water and this planet's bacteria. The tiny organisms are eating our shelter from the inside." Dr. Neareth was taking care of 6 sick crew members. They were lying on wet beds, shivering and coughing. "The water purification system failed completely yesterday," she said. "We are down to our emergency water supplies." "How long will those last?" asked Vexal. 3 days, maybe 4 if we are careful." Amy Foster was trying to help, but she was not feeling well either. The alien food made her sick, and she had lost weight. "We need to find Jake," she said. "He might have found a better place to shelter. The human has been dead for 2 weeks." Sighed Vexahol. No one could survive out there with no equipment, but Amy was not so sure. Humans were different from aliens. They had survived on Earth for thousands of years before they had technology. Maybe Jake was still alive. "I want to look." "For him," Amy said. "It is too dangerous," said Vexal. "You could get lost in the forest. Then we would have 2 dead humans instead of 1. Amy wanted to argue, but she started coughing. Dr. Neareth gave her some medicine, but it was almost gone too. Meanwhile, Jake was having his best day yet. He had caught 3 fish and found a tree full of sweet fruit. He had finished building a workshop area next to his house where he could make tools and work on projects, even when it was raining. Jake was also working on a big project. He was trying to make a signal fire that would create a lot of smoke. If there were other survivors, they might see the smoke and come find him. He had built a fire pit on a hill near his house and collected a lot of green wood that would make thick smoke. That evening, Jake lit his signal fire. Smoke rose high into the sky. He could see it from far away, a dark column against the gray clouds. Jake felt hopeful. Maybe someone would see it, but the alien crew was too far away to see Jake's smoke. They were dealing with their own emergency. Their food processor had broken down completely, and they were down to emergency rations that tasted terrible and made everyone sick. "We cannot last much longer," Quill said to Vexahol. "Our technology is failing. Everything is breaking down." Vexahol looked around at his crew. The proud Velcarians were sick and miserable. The smart Zenthari could not fix their broken machines. Even the Aquarians were having trouble. "Maybe we should try to find a better place," suggested Dr. Neareth. "Somewhere drier." "This is the highest ground for miles," said Vexahol. "Everywhere else is worse." But Amy had an idea. "What if we look for the human's crash site? Even if he is dead, maybe his pod had different equipment. Maybe something that works better in this environment." Vexahol thought about it. Their situation was desperate. Maybe it was worth a try. "Fine," he said. "But we can only spare 2 people. We cannot risk losing more crew members." "I will go," said Amy immediately. "And I will go with her," said Dr. Neareth H. If we find remains, I can determine what happened. They would leave in the morning. Amy felt excited for the first time in weeks. She was going to look for Jake, and she had a feeling he might still be alive. Jake had no idea that help was coming. He was busy improving his home and enjoying his first hot meal in days. He had learned to make a kind of stew with fish, vegetables, and herbs he had found in the forest. It tasted better than any food he had eaten on the ship. As Jake ate his dinner by the warm fire, he felt proud of what he had accomplished. He had started with nothing and built a comfortable life. He was not just surviving, he was doing well. Tomorrow, he would work on expanding his garden and maybe build a better fishing net. Jake was already planning his next improvements. He had learned that each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to make his life better. A month had passed since the crash. Jake stood outside his house and looked at everything he had built. It was hard to believe this was the same place where he had almost died from cold and hunger. His house was now bigger and better. He had added a second room for storage and a covered area where he could work even when it rained hard. The walls were solid, the roof did not leak, and the inside stayed warm and dry. Jake had also built furniture. He had a bed made from wood and stuffed with soft grass. He had a table and chairs carved from tree trunks. He had shelves to hold his tools and supplies. Everything was simple but well made. Behind his house, Jake had planted a garden. He had found seeds and roots that grew well in the wet soil. Now he had vegetables growing in neat rows. He had also built a fence around the garden to keep animals from eating his crops. Jake's workshop was full of tools he had made himself. He had hammers and knives and saws all crafted from pieces of his crashed pod. He had learned to sharpen metal and shape wood. His hands were rough from work, but he was proud of what they could do. The best part was his food storage. Jake had learned to smoke meat and fish to make them last longer. He had containers made from hollowed-out gourds where he kept dried fruits and vegetables. He had even learned to make a kind of bread from ground nuts and seeds. Jake never went hungry anymore. He knew where to find food in every season. He knew which plants were medicine and which ones were poison. He could start a fire in the rain and catch fish with his bare hands. As Jake worked in his garden that morning, he heard something strange. Voices. Human voices. Jake stopped digging and listened carefully. Yes, those were definitely people talking, and they were coming closer. His heart beat faster. After a month alone, he was finally going to see other people. Jake quickly put down his tools and walked toward the sound. Through the trees, he could see two figures walking slowly through the forest. They looked tired and wet, and sick. It was Amy Foster and Dr. Nerad H. They had been walking for 2 days, following the path of Jake's crashed pod. Both of them looked terrible. Their clothes were torn and muddy. Amy was limping, and Dr. Nerad H. was coughing. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Amy asked. She sounded exhausted. "The crash site should be close," said Dr. Nerad H. "But I do not think we will find anything useful. The human has been dead for weeks." They walked into the clearing where Jake's house stood. Both of them stopped and stared. They could not believe what they were seeing. "What is this place?" whispered Amy. Dr. Nerad looked around in amazement. "Someone built this recently?" Before they could say anything else, Jake stepped out from behind a tree. "Amy? Dr. Nerad? Is that really you?" Amy screamed. Not from fear, but from surprise and joy. "Jake, you are alive. We thought you were dead." Jake ran over and hugged Amy. She was so thin and weak that he was afraid he might hurt her. Dr. Nerad just stood there with her mouth open, staring at Jake. "You look ... double quotes," Amy started to say, then stopped. Jake looked completely different from the man she remembered. He was stronger and healthier. His skin was tanned from working outside. His clothes were strange, but well made. He looked like he belonged. In this forest. You look terrible, Jake said gently. Come inside. You need food and rest. Jake led them into his house. Amy and Dr. Neerath could not stop looking around. The house was warm and dry and comfortable. It smelled like wood smoke and cooking food. After weeks in their cold, wet, leaking shelter, it felt like paradise. Sit down, Jake said, pointing to his handmade chairs. I will get you something to eat. Jake brought them bowls of hot stew and cups of clean water. Amy almost cried when she tasted real food again. Dr. Neerath drank the water carefully at first, then gulped it down when she realized it was perfectly clean. How did you do all this? Amy asked, looking around the house. You had no tools. No supplies. I made tools, Jake said simply. I learned to use what the forest gave me. But this is impossible, said Dr. Neerath. Our advanced technology could not handle this environment. How did you survive with primitive methods? Jake smiled. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways. My grandfather taught me that. Amy felt ashamed. While Jake had been thriving, she and the others had been slowly dying despite having advanced equipment. The others are in bad shape, she said. Our shelter is falling apart. People are sick. We are running out of food and water. How many people? Jake asked. 15, counting us, said Dr. Neerath. But some are very sick. I do not think they will live much longer without help. Jake thought for a moment. We can help them, he said. But they will have to come here. I cannot move all my supplies to them. Vexahol will never agree to that, said Amy. He is too proud. He thinks human methods are primitive. Then he can stay proud and wet, said Jake. But anyone who wants to be warm and dry and well-fed is welcome here. Dr. Neerath was studying Jake's house with scientific interest. This construction is remarkable, she said. It is more effective than our military shelter. How did you design it? I did not design it, Jake said. I just built what made sense. When the rain comes down, it needs somewhere to go. When the wind blows, the walls need to be strong. It is not complicated. But it was complicated to Dr. Neerath. Her people had spent thousands of years developing advanced technology, but they had forgotten how to work with nature instead of against it. Jake had remembered something his people had always known, that sometimes simple solutions worked best. We need to go back and tell the others, Amy said. But I do not think I can walk that far again. I am too weak. You do not need to go back. Today, Jake said, rest here tonight. Eat good food. Get your strength back. Tomorrow, we will figure out how to help the others. That night, Amy and Dr. Neerath slept in real beds for the first time in a month. They were warm and dry and safe. Outside, rain fell on the strong roof and ran away through Jake's gutters. Dr. Neerath lay awake thinking about what she had seen. The human had not just survived. He had created something better than what they had started with. She was beginning to understand that there was more to survival than advanced technology. Amy was thinking about Jake. A month ago, he had been just another crew member. Now he was someone who could build a home with his bare hands and make life comfortable in the middle of nowhere. She felt proud to be human. Jake was thinking too. He was excited to help the other survivors, but he was also worried. Would they be willing to learn his methods? Or would their pride keep them from accepting help from a primitive human? Tomorrow would bring answers. For tonight, it was enough that he was no longer alone. The next morning, Amy and Dr. Neerath felt better than they had in weeks. Jake had given them dry clothes made from animal skins and fed them a breakfast of fresh fish, fruit, and his homemade bread. They both felt stronger and ready to face the journey back to the other survivors. "I will come with you," Jake said as they prepared to leave. "The sick people need help right away." Jake packed supplies in a bag he had woven from plant fibers. He brought clean water in containers made from gourds, medicine made from forest plants, and dried food that would travel well. He also brought some of his tools in case they needed to make repairs. The walk back to the alien camp took most of the day. Jake was shocked when he saw the condition of the other survivors. Their military shelter was falling apart. Water dripped through holes in the roof, and the walls were covered with mold. The smell inside was terrible. Commander Vexahol looked up when they entered the shelter. His gray fur was matted and dirty, and his eyes were dull with sickness. When he saw Jake, he could not believe it. "The human lives," he said in a weak voice. "How is this possible?" "Hello, Commander," Jake said politely. "I brought some supplies to help." Jake looked around at the other survivors. They were in terrible shape. Some were lying on wet bedding, shivering with fever. Others sat in corners, too weak to move. The proud aliens who had once seemed so advanced and powerful now looked defeated. "Doctor, Neerith told me about your settlement," said Vexahol. His voice was bitter. "She says you have built a paradise while we suffer in this mess." "I built a home," Jake said simply. "You are welcome to share it." "Share it?" Vexahol laughed, but it was not a happy sound. A proud Velcarian warrior asking for help from a primitive human? Never. But Chief Engineer Quill was more practical. "Commander, look around you. We are dying. Our technology has failed. If the human has found a way to survive, we should listen to him." "Listen to him?" Vexahol snarled. "He has no education, no training. He is just a maintenance worker." Jake did not get angry. Instead, he started helping the sick survivors. He gave them clean water to drink and used his plant medicines to treat their fevers. He showed Dr. Nairat H. how to make poultices from certain leaves that would help heal their skin problems. Within hours, the sick crew members were feeling better. Jake's simple treatments worked better than the advanced medicines that had run out weeks ago. "How do you know these plants are medicine?" asked Dr. Nairat H. "I watched the animals," Jake explained. "When they were hurt or sick, I saw what plants they ate. Then I tried small amounts to see if they would help humans too." Quill was amazed. "You tested unknown plants on yourself? That was extremely dangerous." "Everything is dangerous when you are trying to survive," Jake said. "But staying ignorant is more dangerous than learning." As the day went on, more of the alien crew began to listen to Jake. He showed them how to weave waterproof mats from plant fibers. He taught them how to build better drainage around their shelter. He helped them purify water using methods that worked without technology. But Vexahol remained stubborn. "We do not need help from humans," he insisted. "We will fix our own problems." "With what?" asked Amy. "Your machines are broken. Your supplies are gone. Your shelter is collapsing." "We have backups," Vexahol said, but his voice was uncertain. 3 days passed. Jake stayed with the group, teaching them and helping them recover. He showed them how to catch fish and which plants were safe to eat. He helped them build a proper fire that would stay lit even in the rain. Slowly, the alien survivors began to get better. Their strength returned as they ate Jake's food. Their spirits improved as they learned his methods. Even some of the proud Velcarians began to admit that the humans' ways worked better than their technology. On the 4th day, the rescue ship arrived. Captain Rodriguez of the rescue vessel could not believe what he found. He had expected to pick up desperate survivors clinging to life with their emergency equipment. Instead, he found a group that looked healthy and well-fed. "What happened here?" he asked Amy as the rescue team landed. Jake happened, Amy said proudly. He saved all of us. Captain Rodriguez looked around the improved camp. The aliens had built better shelters using Jake's methods. They had clean water and plenty of food. They looked like people who had been camping for fun, not fighting for their lives. Where did you get these supplies? The captain asked. We made them, said Quill, holding up a fishing net he had woven himself. The human taught us how. Jake stood quietly to one side, not wanting attention. But Commander Vexel surprised everyone by walking over to him. I owe you an apology, Vexel said, and a debt I can never repay. You saved my crew when I could not. You do not owe me anything, Jake said. We helped each other. No, said Vexel firmly. You helped us. We gave you nothing in return except doubt and insults. You showed honor that puts me to shame. Captain Rodriguez was curious about Jake's settlement, so Amy led a group to see it. The rescue team was amazed by what Jake had built. His house was more comfortable than their ship's quarters. His workshop was better organized than most professional facilities. You did all this with no tools? Asked the ship's engineer. I made tools, Jake said. Everything you need is out there if you know how to use it. Dr. Nyrat H. had been taking notes about Jake's methods during their stay. This needs to be studied, she said to Captain Rodriguez. What Jake has accomplished could change how we approach survival training. The humans should teach at the academy, said Vexahol. All species could learn from his methods. Jake was surprised. I am just a maintenance worker. I do not know about teaching. You taught us, said Amy, and we were terrible students at first. Captain Rodriguez offered Jake a position as a survival instructor at the Interstellar Academy. It was a prestigious job that would let him share his knowledge with beings from across the galaxy. I will think about it, Jake said as they prepared to leave the planet. Jake took one last look at his forest home. He felt sad to leave it behind, but also proud of what he had accomplished. He had started with nothing and built a life. More importantly, he had proven that humans could not only survive in impossible situations, they could thrive. The story of Jake's survival spread quickly through the galaxy. Other species began to study human methods and add them to their own survival training. The techniques that Jake had learned from his grandfather became part of official emergency protocols. Jake did take the teaching job at the academy. His classes were always full with students from dozens of different worlds. They came to learn the secret of human adaptability, but Jake always told them the same thing. There is no secret. You just have to remember that your brain is the best tool you have. Everything else is just details. Years later, when young officers faced their own emergencies, they would remember Jake's lessons. They would look around at whatever environment they were in and ask themselves, what can I use? What can I build? How can I make this work?